Okay, fine. Okay, yep. All right. Okay, yep. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah. I'm doing it now. I'm doing it. Stop asking. Hey, Alice 11 Universe, it's Zander, and welcome to How Zander Would Book, my ongoing fantasy booking series where I take messed up stars and stories from WWE's past, and I give them new life, and I try to fix them. So if you're new here, so far I've done Bobby Roode, The Women's Revolution, and Zack Ryder. But this is one that has been asked for a whole lot, quite literally on all three previous bookings I've done, and that would be everyone's favorite Canadian ginger, Sami Zayn. Now, this episode is not going to be as high edited as the others because I'm going to be on vacation when it goes out. But first things first, Sammy's one of the only wrestlers to have ever made me cry with a match. I rewatched his match with Neville from TakeOver Our Evolution the other day, and I actually cried watching Sammy win that belt. I remember how excited I was back then when he won. I've always been a Sami Zayn guy, even when everyone else gave up. So, let's get a little recap, shall we? Sami Zayn debuted in NXT in 2013. He had a great series of matches with Cesaro over the next year. He would cement himself as the heart and soul of NXT. He went on to beat Neville, now known as Pac, in AEW. We'll get to him. He beat him for the NXT Championship in December of 2014 before his best friend, Kevin Owens, who just debuted earlier that night, turned on him and laid him out. Owens went on to beat Zayn for the NXT Championship by referee stoppage in February 2015. Sammy debuted a few weeks later on Raw to accept Cena's US Open challenge. He took Cena to the limit in what was no joke, Cena's best run, in my opinion. Unfortunately, though, in that match, Sammy popped his shoulder out of place, had a match with Kevin Owens a few weeks later where he would then go on to be written out in that match in order to go get surgery for that shoulder. He would return that November after NXT TakeOver London. They set up what looked like it was going to be a redemption arc of him challenging Finn Balor, but instead that was Samoa Joe. In that time, Sami Zayn had a debut cameo in the Royal Rumble, eliminated Kevin Owens, then returned to NXT despite us all thinking he was officially on Raw. He went on to lose to Samoa Joe and ended up putting over Shinsuke Nakamura in Nakamura's debut at TakeOver Dallas. Also in that time, he did show up after Fastlane 2016 to face off with Kevin Owens. So Mania 32 was a busy weekend for Sammy. He had what is genuinely one of my favorite matches ever against Nakamura. Then he had the Intercontinental Championship ladder match the following night. And then at WrestleMania, Sammy and Kevin took one another out in the ladder match. It looked like Sammy was about to win the match, which we all actually really thought he was going to, and then Miz shoved him down like a dick. Only to then have Zack Ryder shove Miz off the ladder and get the shock win. We covered that last time. After that, Sammy lost to Kevin at Payback. They challenged at a fatal four-way and cost one another the Intercontinental title at Extreme Rules. Sammy was in the Money in the Bank ladder match in 2016, had another one of my favorite matches ever, beating Owens at Battleground. He teamed up with Neville on the SummerSlam pre-show, and then Braun Strowman happened. Braun Strowman spent the next few months from October to January murdering Sami Zayn. Sammy, in all that time, did lose an IC title match to The Miz at Survivor Series on a roll-up, by the way. Sammy and Braun had a match, if that's what you could call it, at Roadblock End of the Line, which is just a weird double negative name for a show. Sammy technically won because he survived the time limit. He had a face-off with Lesnar on the Raw before the Royal Rumble, which, oh my god, go watch that segment and see how over Sammy was. Then he took Seth Rollins' place in the Rumble and the feud with Samoa Joe. Seth was out injured. In the Battle Royal at Mania, moved to SmackDown, beat Baron Corbin in Money in the Bank again, did nothing except for lose. I guess the Mike Kanellis stuff happened until Hell in a Cell, where he turned heel and helped Kevin Owens beat Shane McMahon. The fact Kevin Owens would need help to beat Shane McMahon is ridiculous and just makes me sad. They were fired, unfired, fired again, had Daniel Bryan's return match, which saw Bryan lay on the outside for 90% of the match until he got the hot tag and tabbed out Sammy. They both went back to Raw. Sammy feuded with the returning Bobby Lashley's, and I'm just not going to talk about the sister storyline. I've already done that. Sammy went out for rotator cuff surgery after his match with Lashley, returned after Mania 35, stayed heel, became Nakamura's manager, and with the help of Nakamura and Cesaro, at Elimination Chamber 2020, the final pay-per-view with fans, 1,462 days after his official main roster debut, Sami Zayn finally won a championship when he won the Intercontinental title from Braun Strowman in a 3-on-1 handicap match after Nakamura and Cesaro took 90% of the match. Sammy defended the title against Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania, vanished and vacated the title due to the pandemic, returned in the first episode inside of the Thunderdome to attack Jeff Hardy and AJ Styles and claim he was the true Intercontinental Champion. He won my favorite title match or my favorite WWE match of 2020, where he handcuffed Jeff and AJ to ladders, held the title until he lost it to Big E on Christmas in a lumberjack match, and then that led to his current run, where he believes there's a conspiracy against him and has a camera crew following him around at all times, making, from what I've heard, is actually going to be a documentary, and I can't wait to see it if it's real. It also caused Logan Paul to take a stunner at WrestleMania, so can't complain about that. I mean, overall, Sammy's main roster run was a bit all over the place. It's been frustrating in a lot of places, but he's finally found his footing and his place as an upper mid-card heel. But it does feel like there was a pure underdog babyface that you dropped the ball with along the way, Vince. So my goal today is to try and take care of Sammy from 2016 to current day and make him a main event level babyface in that time. Bear with me, we're going to take a while. So I'm actually keeping just about everything from his March debut all the way through the SummerSlam pre-show the same. Now, I want you to hear me out. He was in a high-profile feud with Owens from WrestleMania through Battleground. They didn't need the Intercontinental title in that feud. And at SummerSlam, all of Raw's other top guys were in other stories. Roman Reigns was with Rusev, and Owens were with Enzo and Cass, Rollins was with Balor, so he and Neville teaming up on the pre-show, it's not the end of the world. So, my few small tweaks for the story for Sammy. First of all, he doesn't lose to the scum of the earth, Alberto Del Rio, before Money in the Bank, and he doesn't lose as often on the road to SummerSlam. He can lose sometimes, but he doesn't need to be dropping matches every single week. You got to keep building him up. Also, he needs to stay the hell away from Braun Strowman. One more thing, this is just for me. He has to have a match with Finn Balor in NXT for the title at some point. It doesn't have to be at Dallas, but I'd have rather watched Zayn and Balor go the full hour for the title instead of the 2 out of 3 falls match with Zayn and Joe. That's just me. Anyway, Sammy and Neville beat the Dudley Boys at SummerSlam. That's the Dudley's final match that can be written off TV by Gallows and Anderson the next night, like in real life. So, also at SummerSlam, the Gallows and Anderson feud with New Day does not involve ring postitis. It does not involve Jon Stewart. And it does not involve anyone's balls. Instead, it's just New Day versus Gallows and Anderson. New Day win clean. New Day, after SummerSlam, think they've beaten everyone there is to beat. That's when Sami Zayn and Neville come out and throw their names into the ring for the tag team championships. Gallows and Anderson, by the way, kind of get their heat back with the whole Dudley Boys thing. The two weren't up to much at this point anyway, so may as well build up Raw's abysmal tag division from this time period. Clash of Champions, it's Sammy and Neville challenging Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods instead of Big E for the Raw tag titles. I think those four would make some flippy magic. New Day win because I won't get rid of their title reign that was a record-breaking reign, even though I would really like to. Meanwhile, on Clash of Champions, Roman still wins the U.S. title. Owens beats Rollins, but this time we're going to keep Triple H involved in that story a little more. Maybe I'll fix that one day. And Sasha Banks retains the Raw Women's title, like in my Women's Revolution rebooking. Go watch it. Also on that show, the Cruiserweight division kicks off on Raw with the match between TJP and Brian Kendrick. I'm not going to talk about the former any more than I absolutely have to. The night after Clash of Champions, Sammy and Neville are put into a match with Sheamus and Cesaro, who Mick Foley has decided are going to be a tag team because their best-of-7 match ended in a draw the previous night. Sammy and Neville want a rematch, and so on Raw, it's Insane Gravity, saw a lot of people calling that back then, versus The Bar. And Sammy and Neville hit their finish on Sheamus, which I would like to be a haluva kick into a red arrow, please. But unaware to them, Cesaro makes a blind tag, hits the neutralizer on Neville. He and Sheamus win the match. We see a little bit of tension brewing between Sammy and Neville at this point. It was never meant to be a long-term team anyway, so the next week the two have a match with Gallows and Anderson, who are currently feuding with Enzo and Cass as well. Good Brothers win this, and this is where Neville snaps and turns heel. Neville snaps and beats the holy heck out of Sami Zayn because Neville is a dangerous, dangerous man. Just look at his recent years as Pac and his King of the Cruiserweights run from WWE. He's a fantastic heel. So at Hell in a Cell, Mick Foley decides to make it a match between Sammy and Neville, which can just take the place of the Bayley versus Dana Brooke match. That match didn't need a spot on pay-per-view. And I've already written that botched pin from Dana out of the history books. You can sort of replay their story from NXT with Sammy being too nice. That allows the now nasty heel Neville to beat Sammy. Later that night, instead of Brian Kendrick winning the Cruiserweight title, TJP defends against Grand Metalik in a CWC Finals rematch. Perkins wins when he's jumped by Neville. This is where Neville officially joins the Cruiserweight division, so we're not holding off until December. The next night on Raw, Neville comes out and he cuts the promo about being forgotten and taken away from the Cruiserweight division because the WWE neglected true talent like him out of fear. Sammy comes out and joins the promo battle between TJ Perkins, Neville, and Brian Kendrick. This leads to a tag team match on Raw that night, Neville and Brian Kendrick versus Sami Zayn and TJP. The heels win and Neville attacks Brian Kendrick as well. Neville has no allies. Now, before you tell me that this is ruining Sami Zayn and Neville by putting them in the Cruiserweight scene, first of all, no it isn't. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean that it's something being ruined. So, sit back and listen. Second, it gives some name recognition to the Cruiserweight scene. And third, it sets up the ability for people to move in and out of the division. For example, say someone like Cedric Alexander or Noam Dar, no idea why I'd pick them, gets really over. You slide them into matches with guys like Rusev and Kevin Owens. But then they can still go into the Cruiserweight title picture as well. Really fleshes out your divisions more. On the Road to Survivor Series, Neville rips the Cruiserweight title from TJP on an episode of Raw. That sets up Survivor Series 2016, where I've actually talked about the card a little bit, so we're going to write it out a little bit more. This will make sense down the road. Men's 5v5 is the exact same as real life, except Baron Corbin keeps his spot instead of being kayfabe injured by Kalisto, returning at Survivor Series, and still having Shane McMahon in the match. Nobody cares to see you get hurt, Shane. Just stop. The women's 5v5 is the same lineup I gave in that video. I'm not going back and looking for it. And that tag team mess of a match, I just won't be bothered to fix. Also on that show, instead of Brian Kendrick versus Kalisto for the Cruiserweight title, it's now Neville versus Kalisto, and Neville just straight up wins. Now, if you remember my Women's Revolution rebooking, I mentioned that the change I was making to the Survivor Series 5v5 matches is that the winner of the women's 5v5 gets a woman from the other show, and that would be Becky Lynch to Raw, whereas the men's 5v5 gets a man from the other show, and that's Sami Zayn to SmackDown. Let's talk about how we get there. Raw the next night, we have Becky Lynch arrive like in real life, and in the main event of Raw that night, as an advertisement for the upcoming 205 live show, Sami Zayn versus Neville, no holds barred for the Cruiserweight Championship. Let these two have the final 20 minutes of Raw, and they go at one another. Neville ultimately wins by knocking Sammy out cold with Rings of Saturn. That's a wrap for Sammy on Raw. Also, I'm going to beat you to the comments. I meant in my Women's Revolutionary booking, not real life about Becky. Next night on SmackDown, Miz cuts a promo about how he retained the IC title at Survivor Series against Rusev, who fills the Sami Zayn role of being rolled up by a Maurice distraction. So during Miz's promo, out comes Sami Zayn, who challenges Miz to an Intercontinental title match. Miz refuses, saying he watched Sammy get knocked out on Raw last night by Neville, so Sammy doesn't deserve an IC title match. Dolph Ziggler comes out to challenge Miz to a rematch for TLC, and then out comes Baron Corbin, who was actually not the most hated person in wrestling at this point. So, at TLC, it's still the match between Ziggler and Miz, where Miz wins by kicking Dolph in the balls. And Baron Corbin and Sami Zayn have a chairs match instead of Corbin and Kalisto, where Corbin ties Sammy up in the ropes, swings the chair at Sammy. Sammy slips out last second. Chair bounces off the ropes into the face of Corbin, who turns around, bam, haluva kick with the chair into his face. 1, 2, 3, Sami Zayn wins. This leads to Daniel Bryan making an Intercontinental title match for SmackDown the Tuesday after TLC. Sami Zayn versus The Miz gets the main event. Miz tries to get himself DQ'd, but Sammy dodges the chair shot. Ref takes the chair. Maurice tries to attack Sammy. Sammy's learned not to be distracted and does Maurice's little hand thing that she does, that, into Maurice's face. And then Miz runs at Sammy, bumps into Maurice instead, gets knocked in the corner, haluva kick, your winner, and the new Intercontinental Champion, Sami Zayn. In the weeks building to the Royal Rumble, Sami Zayn, Dean Ambrose, The Miz, Dolph Ziggler, and let's keep him in there because it's fun, Luke Harper, have a fatal 5-way elimination number 1 contenders match for the WWE title that night. Miz gets eliminated first by Ambrose and Zayn. Zayn hits a haluva kick into Dirty Deeds. Miz returns a few minutes later to distract Sammy. Harper is able to hit a discus clothesline and eliminate him. Harper is eliminated by a zigzag, and then it's Ambrose and Ziggler in a SummerSlam rematch. Dolph Ziggler wins, and this sets the story on the real life path. Miz loses the rematch to Sammy, who keeps the IC championship, keeping it on the road to the Royal Rumble. Sami Zayn gets a good showing in the Royal Rumble, coming down to the final 4 of the Rumble with Bray Wyatt, Chris Jericho, and The Undertaker. Roman does not enter at number 30, because how do you even get the number 30 slot when you lost a world title match earlier in the night? And Jericho wins the Rumble, because no, for Randy, you didn't need it. Elimination Chamber, the WWE title match is Cena, Styles, Bray Wyatt, Dean Ambrose, and Sami Zayn, and Baron Corbin. Sami clearly getting a little bit of Ambrose's run from 2016. Sami eliminates Corbin and Bray Wyatt, Bray Wyatt ultimately goes on to win the title, like in real life. On the road to WrestleMania, Sami Zayn finds himself in a battle between several challengers. Bray Wyatt's currently dealing with Randy Orton, who burned his house down. And on an episode of SmackDown on the road to WrestleMania, we're going to hold a number one contenders battle royal to the Intercontinental Championship, which, would you know it, is won by Dean Ambrose. Ambrose would probably be a shock winner, as people probably wouldn't expect a face versus face match at WrestleMania. So, the WrestleMania 33 match card looks like this, because this should be one of the only times I think I have to list it off. So, Dean Ambrose is able to beat Sami Zayn just barely for the Intercontinental Championship. Seth Rollins beats Triple H. The Hardy Boys return in that fatal four-way ladder match to win the Raw Tag Team titles. Brock Lesnar beats Goldberg, not for the Universal title. Samoa Joe versus a returning Finn Balor for the U.S. title. Finn Balor wins. John Cena and Nikki Bella versus The Miz and Maurice in the most poorly aged WrestleMania match ever. Cena and Nikki win. Bayley winning the Four Horsewomen Women's Fatal Four-Way match for the Raw title, like in my booking. Orton versus Bray for the WWE title, where I preferably have Harper and Rowan return to join Bray and reform the Wyatt family, assisting him to beat Randy. But if I'm forced to book you know who becoming world champion the following month, so be it. Neville retains the Cruiserweight title over Mustafa Ali, not the other guy, because Ali is brilliant. Naomi beats Alexa Bliss for the SmackDown title, and the main event, which should have been the main event, Chris Jericho beats Kevin Owens to win the Universal Championship. I think that's a good WrestleMania. I don't have to change much. Anyways, after this, Sami Zayn's going to stay on SmackDown to enter a very stacked United States title picture with the likes of AJ Styles, Finn Balor, Kevin Owens, and Baron Corbin. Meanwhile, Dean Ambrose has taken the IC title to Raw, like in real life. And on the shake-up episode of SmackDown, it's a fatal four-way to determine Finn Balor's first challenger. Owens, Styles, Corbin, Zayn. Kevin Owens is the winner of that with underhanded tactics, because I'm not giving you Styles and Balor yet. You got to be patient. Meanwhile, at Backlash, Sammy is the first opponent of the debuting Shinsuke Nakamura. I'm not making you sit through Ziggler and Nakamura. The Money in the Bank ladder match is the exact same as real life, with Corbin winning, except for Finn Balor is going to be in the match this time, please. If you want, you can even have Balor have a face-off with Styles in the match. After this is Battleground, where Sammy's going to get some much-needed momentum back with a win over Baron Corbin. While instead of Corbin, Nakamura is going to face Kevin Owens. And at SummerSlam, Finn Balor loses the United States title to AJ Styles, while Sami Zayn has a true underdog heartfelt win over Randy Orton. And meanwhile, Nakamura beats John Cena. Again, I'm aware that sounds a little familiar. Meanwhile, he who shall not be named gets a win over Rusev, who at this point is turning face with the Rusev Day stuff, and loses because of Singh interference, because that was the only match he knew how to wrestle. Not Rusev, the other guy. Lots of love, Miro. Keep kicking ass, big guy. Sammy's going to parlay this win over Randy Orton into his feud with Bobby Roode for Hell in a Cell. Watch that video to know what I mean. Sammy comes up short to Bobby Roode, and then at Survivor Series 2017, Sammy's not on the show. And that's because we've already established SmackDown's team is Bobby Roode, John Cena, Kevin Owens, Shinsuke Nakamura, and Randy Orton. I guess you could put Sammy in there somewhere. Sammy misses Survivor Series, but on that show we have Shield versus New Day, Miz versus Rusev, and a champion versus champion matches, 5v5 matches, Bar versus the Usos, and WWE champion AJ Styles versus Universal champion Brock Lesnar. I was tempted to have Sammy be the one to enter end the summer of you-know-who, but it seems rushed, especially after Sammy lost a handful of big matches to the likes of Bobby Roode and others. Ultimately, I kept it on AJ since he wasn't pinned in the triple threat to lose it to Rusev at Hell in a Cell. Rusev replacing Corbin, of course. So on the road to SmackDown's December show, Clash of Champions, Sammy gets involved in the U.S. title scene, where at Clash of Champions, it's going to be Sami Zayn, Baron Corbin, Dolph Ziggler, and Rusev for the U.S. title. Rusev wins by tapping out Dolph. Meanwhile, Nakamura loses to Roode, like in that booking, and AJ Styles retains the title against the former champion. Don't remember his name. Elsewhere on the show, Finn Balor beats Randy Orton. This will be important later. Royal Rumble comes in 2017. The show sees AJ Styles defend the WWE title against Bobby Roode. And of course, the 2018 Rumble, which will still be won by Shinsuke Nakamura. Sami Zayn is once again so close, but so far from winning the Rumble. Trust me, this is getting somewhere. I promise. Bear with me. Fastlane comes and Sammy is in the six-pack title match, which I've made yet another adjustment to from the Bobby Roode video. So instead of Ziggler, Roode is in that, like that video. But instead of Corbin, Finn Balor's in the match. That just feels better. Styles still retains. WrestleMania, Sammy is going to win the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal instead of Matt Hardy, because it didn't really do anything for Matt Hardy, except maybe make the Leaders of Worlds, but you can get there otherwise. And Sammy winning it, maybe he can use it for something. So, the WrestleMania 34 match card sees Sami Zayn win the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, Bobby Roode beats John Cena, Nakamura beats Styles for the WWE title, Daniel Bryan beats Chad Gable for the US title, Seth Rollins versus The Miz one-on-one for the IC title, and Brock Lesnar retaining the Universal title over Roman Reigns. That's all I've booked for now. That's all the groundwork that I think needs to be set up here. So, for those of you who are probably getting impatient with me, calm down. This is getting somewhere. I promise. I needed to set everything up for Sammy, but I couldn't just bury everyone else with Sammy winning all the time. So after WrestleMania, Sammy stays on SmackDown yet again. But here's the issue. Sammy tore his rotator cuff around this time, so I have to pretend that I don't know that's coming. And so for this booking, after WrestleMania, he's going to parlay his Battle Royal win into entering the WWE title scene along the likes of Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, Daniel Bryan, and Nakamura. Sammy wrestles Joe and Nakamura in a triple threat at Backlash for the title. Nakamura pins Sammy to set a rematch with Joe up down the road. But you can't tell me you don't want to see those two fight for the world title. Sammy is out at Money in the Bank, and from there, we jump ahead to February 2019, where Sammy was cleared to return. So, to give a little background on what's been going on in the build while Sammy's been away, Nakamura lost the WWE title to Daniel Bryan at SummerSlam. Bryan has turned heel on the road to Survivor Series because for this to work, Bryan needs to turn heel earlier than the month before WrestleMania. I know he turned before Survivor Series in real life. Some people will know why I say the month before Mania. I'm just going to do a little bit of cheating here. So Sammy knew he needed surgery for a little while before he was written off TV. This is a fact. He was cleared February 27th, 2019. His last match was Money in the Bank 2018. Having written him out in April instead of June gives us an extra 2 months of recovery time. So when Ali is forced to miss the Elimination Chamber due to injury, we announce that in the Gauntlet match, his replacement is going to be revealed in the Gauntlet. Out comes Daniel Bryan to start, but of course, the Gauntlet's mystery man is Sami Zayn. So yeah, it's kind of Sammy Mania and not Kofi Mania. I do this because Kofi, unfortunately, was never going to be seen as a world champion by WWE. They were kind of bullied into it by the fans. Not saying that I'm unhappy for Kofi, but with Sammy, the spark was kind of there before, and I think they just kind of got cold feet with him. So we're going to keep the Gauntlet the same. He beats Bryan, he rolls up Joe, he pins Nakamura, he pins Hardy, and he comes up short to AJ. Orton ultimately wins to get the final slot. Bryan wins the Chamber, and honestly, I think Sammy and Bryan would tell a more compelling story for Mania. Bryan calling Sammy a B-plus player and talking about how he sees so much of himself in Sammy, so on and so forth. You can call this a pipe dream, but he wasn't on Mania 35 anyway, so not like he's going to be wrapped up in another story. Sammy brings in backup to fight Bryan and Rowan. In his corner at WrestleMania, Kevin Owens. And Sami Zayn, clean as a whistle, wins the WWE title. Kevin Owens doesn't turn on him, and instead they have a celebration. Sammy can go on to defend the title the next few months against Samoa Joe, Shinsuke Nakamura, Daniel Bryan, so on and so forth, until Fox forces him to lose it to Brock Lesnar on the debut show. Unfortunately, I doubt that would be allowed to change because WWE has to bow to Fox's demands. Even though Brock was off of SmackDown 3 weeks later, but, it's definitely not a squash. Sammy and Brock are actually going to go about 15 minutes, and it takes 3 F5s to put Sami Zayn down, and Brock can be the only person to ever kick out of a haluva kick. Owens comes out to save Sammy from Brock after the match, and we do that Brock and KO match everyone wanted at Survivor Series. And the final note I'll end on, Sammy and Kevin win the tag titles at WrestleMania 36, and the crowd can go, oh, and then they have to vacate them the next night. So that's that. I do all right. I mean, it wasn't the easiest thing to do. It took 3 years to get into the world title, but at least in the meantime, he had an IC title run, had some main event level matches. He beat the likes of Randy Orton. I mean, I don't know why y'all asked me for this forever. I mean, I needed a video to hold off while I'm on vacation this week. Anyways, thanks for watching. Be sure to haluva kick the like button and subscribe. We're climbing the hill to 1,000 subscribers. We're dangerously close to 600 if we haven't hit it by the time this comes out. And hey, I've been Zander, and that is how I would book Sami Zayn. Be sure to tune in the next few months because my next fantasy booking is going to break orbit. I've been Zander, and that was Fantasy Booking. Zander out.